finding that the cloth does indeed date back to the time of Christ, and with artificial intelligence having something to say about the Shroud.
Reporters were stunned. Scientists went silent. And now AI has uncovered something buried deep within the Shroud of Turin. Something no one was supposed to see. What AI just found in the Shroud of Turin left scientists shocked. Not because it answered an old question, but because it opened a new one. For centuries, experts debated whether the image on the cloth was a miracle or a masterpiece. But after this latest analysis, the conversation has shifted into something far more unsettling. Whatever this is, it defies explanation. And once you see what was found, you'll understand why this is terrifying. The cloth that defied time. The Shroud of Turin isn't just a religious artifact. It's a question wrapped in linen. Measuring 14 feet long and just over 3 feet wide, it bears the ghostly image of a man who appears to have been crucified front and back, stretched lengthwise as if the body had been wrapped and then somehow vanished. It's stained with blood-like markings on the wrists, feet, and side. There are wounds that suggest a crown of thorns. And for centuries, people have asked the same thing. Is this the burial cloth of Jesus Christ? The earliest confirmed appearance of the shroud dates to the mid-13th century in France. It was displayed in Lille, a small town where it immediately drew attention, controversy, and pilgrims. Skeptics accused the church of creating a forgery for profit. Supporters believed they were witnessing something sacred. From there, it passed into the hands of the House of Savoy, eventually making its way to Turin, Italy in 1578, where it remains today inside a climate-controlled bulletproof case at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. What's always set the shroud apart from other religious relics is the image itself. At first glance, it's barely visible, a smudge on aged fabric. But when photographed in 1898 by Sacandopia, something extraordinary happened. The negative plate revealed a detailed, almost photographic image of a man. His face, his hands, even strands of hair. People were stunned. How could a medieval relic have properties that mimic modern photography centuries before the camera was even invented? From that moment on, the shroud crossed a line. It wasn't just an object of faith anymore. It became a scientific mystery. Over the years, researchers have subjected it to a battery of tests. Chemists, physicists, textile experts, and forensic analysts have all tried to explain it. The cloth is made of linen woven in a herringbone pattern consistent with ancient fabrics from the Middle East. Pollen samples found on the shroud come from plants native to the Jerusalem area. Traces of myrrh and aloes, substances used in Jewish burial customs, were also reportedly discovered, but none of that proves who the man was. In 1988, carbon dating tests were performed by 3 laboratories. Their results placed the cloth's origin between 1260 and 1390 AD, supporting the theory of a medieval forgery. That should have ended the debate, but it didn't. Instead, it ignited a new one. Critics argued that the sample tested came from a repaired portion of the shroud, not the original weave. Others pointed out inconsistencies in the cleaning methods used before dating. To this day, the carbon dating remains one of the most hotly disputed elements in shroud research. Despite the science, the mystery remains. No paint, dye, or pigment has ever been definitively found that could explain how the image was made. No known method, ancient or modern, can recreate the image exactly as it appears on the cloth. It has 3-dimensional qualities. The depth of shading in the image correlates with the distance between the cloth and the body it supposedly covered. But how is that possible? Some researchers say it's a miracle. Others believe it's a brilliant medieval hoax. And still others insist we simply don't have the right tools yet to understand it. But the one thing everyone agrees on is this. The shroud is not easy to explain, and the image it holds should not exist. Now, for the first time, those right tools may have finally arrived because what's coming next doesn't involve microscopes or carbon samples. It involves something smarter, something that doesn't blink, something that can detect patterns the human eye was never meant to see. And it's already started looking. Science versus faith. The dating controversy. The 1988 carbon dating test was supposed to end the debate. 3 respected laboratories, Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona, each tested fibers from a corner of the shroud. Their results pointed to a date between 1260 and 1390 AD. For many scientists, that was checkmate. The shroud, they said, was a medieval forgery, possibly created to drive pilgrimages or religious influence. Newspapers around the world ran headlines declaring the mystery solved, but almost immediately cracks began to show. The sample used for testing came from the lower left-hand corner of the cloth, an area believed by some researchers to have been damaged and rewoven during the Middle Ages. Textile expert Raymond Rogers later argued that this portion may not have been original to the linen at all. He pointed out differences in chemical composition, suggesting that the sample was taken from a section contaminated by centuries of repairs. If true, the dating would reflect the repair work, not the cloth's true origin. The labs also never tested multiple regions of the cloth. They focused solely on that one corner. In hindsight, many agree this was a flawed approach. But at the time, access to the shroud was extremely limited, and the church only approved a small sample. That limitation now looms large over every argument that cites the 1988 results. Since then, a wave of counter-studies has tried to challenge or supplement the original findings. One of the most intriguing developments came from Italian scientists using a technique known as wide-angle X-ray scattering or waxes. This method analyzes the structure of cellulose in ancient textiles to estimate their age. Their findings, the fibers examined, could date back nearly 2,000 years, much closer to the time of Jesus. Skeptics responded with caution. They pointed out that waxes is sensitive to environmental variables like temperature and humidity, making its results less precise than carbon dating. And yet others argued that even if the technique isn't perfect, it provides a second voice, a voice that contradicts the official timeline. Then came the pollen studies. Botanists discovered pollen grains on the shroud from plants native to the Middle East, including species found in the area surrounding Jerusalem. Critics counted that such contamination could occur through centuries of handling or environmental exposure. But taken together with the textile pattern, herringbone twill, which was rare in medieval Europe, but present in ancient Middle Eastern burial cloths, the argument for an earlier origin didn't completely collapse. And this is where things get complicated. Science by its nature seeks repeatable results. But the shroud doesn't play by modern rules. The deeper researchers dig, the more anomalies they find. No one has explained the image's three-dimensional properties. No one can replicate the facial details using known artistic methods from the Middle Ages. No brush strokes, no pigment layering, just a surface discoloration affecting only the topmost linen fibers. Something closer to a scorch than a stain. For people of faith, this fuels belief. For scientists, it invites caution and frustration. What if the shroud is authentic, but the tests were flawed? Or what if it is a clever forgery, but one that used techniques we still don't understand? There's no final answer yet, just a growing rift between two worldviews, one that demands data and another that seeks meaning. And that brings us to a new player in the investigation. A tool that doesn't rely on assumptions or religious narratives. One that doesn't ask what the shroud is, but rather how the image formed. Artificial intelligence isn't here to prove or disprove divinity. It's here to analyze patterns, process anomalies, and let the data speak for itself. The question is, what will it say? Technology enters the tomb. For over a century, the mystery of the Shroud of Turin has outpaced every method used to analyze it. Traditional science couldn't crack it. Religious arguments couldn't settle it. And photographic evidence only deepened the enigma. But now, something entirely new has entered the arena. Artificial intelligence. AI doesn't believe. It doesn't speculate. It doesn't care about theology, history, or reputation. It looks at data pure and unfiltered. And when scientists handed it images of the shroud, they didn't expect what happened next. It started with a project led by Brazilian digital designer Cicero Morris. He used 3D simulation software to analyze how a cloth like the shroud would drape over different surfaces. One model simulated the cloth lying over a real human body. Another simulated it over a low-relief sculpture. The results were telling. The cloth on the human model created distortions. The image stretched unnaturally, curving around shoulders and dipping into hollows. It didn't match what we see on the actual shroud. but the version over a flat sculpted form. That one matched the image almost perfectly. No distortion, no unexpected warping. This raised a disturbing possibility. What if the shroud wasn't wrapped around a body at all? Then came the AI-enhanced image analysis. Thomas McAvoy and his team fed high-resolution photos of the shroud into an AI system designed to detect subtle patterns. Using techniques like principal component analysis, PCA, the software broke the image down into layers of data that the human eye simply cannot isolate. What emerged wasn't just the face of a man. It was structure, symmetry, mathematical consistency. One of the first things the AI noticed was that the image intensity carried nearly all the meaningful information. Not color, not texture, not shading, just intensity. The depth of the image changed in a way that mimicked 3D relief. It responded to mathematical models as if it were encoded, not painted. Even more puzzling was how the discoloration only affected the topmost fibers of the cloth, roughly a few microns deep. Not even modern lasers can consistently achieve that kind of precision on linen without burning through it. And yet here it was somehow present on a cloth more than 600 years old, possibly older. Some researchers saw this and thought of radiation, an intense burst of energy from an unknown source imprinted onto the cloth. Others recalled earlier theories about a photographic effect, theorizing that ancient people may have used rudimentary light-sensitive chemicals. But no known process from antiquity or even from the Renaissance could create an image with these qualities. And this is where the story takes a turn, because AI didn't stop at confirming strange properties. It started identifying things that human researchers hadn't fully noticed or had dismissed. For example, the symmetry around the chest area, a faint but structured pattern near the jawline, areas where the blood stains overlay the image in ways that defy typical transfer mechanics. At this point, even skeptics were paying attention. The AI wasn't proving the shroud was divine, but it was revealing an order that didn't fit any known artistic method. No brush strokes, no transfer technique, no ink bleed, just data that seemed to form a precise, if baffling, image. What does it mean? That depends on who you ask. Some say it's more proof of forgery. Only now they argue it was made with the help of advanced tools we've long since forgotten. Others suggest it might be evidence of something far stranger, something not fully understood even today. But one thing became clear. When the data was stripped of bias, history, and belief, it still didn't behave like an ordinary image. It behaved like something created outside the boundaries of normal human experience. And the more the AI looked, the more it found the pattern that shouldn't be there. The eye's analysis didn't just reveal clarity, it exposed a contradiction. And that's why everything started to shift. According to reports, deep inside the data, something appeared that wasn't supposed to be there. A structured repeating geometry, faint, almost ghost-like, but consistent. Some called it an artifact of digital enhancement. Others said it looked too precise for chance. Either way, what AI just found in the Shroud of Turin left scientists shocked. According to the researchers who worked on the project, this wasn't simply about better image quality or sharpening outlines. The pattern was embedded across multiple layers of analysis. Whether examining ultraviolet fluorescence, thermal imaging, or high-contrast filters, the same symmetrical structure appeared again and again, mostly around the face and chest areas. It didn't resemble brushwork, folds in fabric, or natural blood flow. It looked engineered. At first, the team thought it might be interference caused by the scanning method itself. So, they ran controls. They tested unrelated cloth samples. They randomized portions of the data. Still, the structure held. Not only that, but it appeared to follow mathematical ratios, a kind of invisible scaffolding that framed the contours of the face, torso, and even hands. One researcher speaking anonymously described it as a framework without a builder. The implications of this weren't clear, but they were unsettling. If the shroud's image had been formed by direct contact with a body, there should be distortion, just as the 3D modeling experiments had shown. If it were painted, there should be pigment particles, brush residue, or fiber penetration. But the image showed none of these things. And now layered beneath it all was a pattern no one had seen until AI pulled it from a noise. Some suggested it might be evidence of a lost technology, an unknown form of image projection or primitive photography. Others whispered a different possibility. What if the image had been burned in not by human hands, but by some sudden intense energy, a radiation burst, a plasma event, or something even less explainable? That's when a phrase started circulating behind the scenes, not in the published reports, not in official interviews about the Shroud, though, there's this faint image of a man on there, but it doesn't appear to be paint. Doesn't there appear to be maybe a little bit of blood? But it's not all blood. What's even stranger is the image that's on the Shroud appears to be a photographic negative. But in hushed conversations between scientists who had spent years on the project, they called it terrifying. This is terrifying, one physicist reportedly said during a private conference call. Not because it proves anything supernatural, but because it doesn't fit into any natural category either. It behaves like a phenomenon, not an artifact. In that moment, the mystery of the Shroud seemed to deepen. It was no longer just a religious relic or a medieval curiosity. It was something else entirely. An object whose image might not have been formed by touch, paint, or pressure, but by process. And the most unsettling question, that process might not be replicable, at least not yet. So, what does this mean for the origin of the Shroud? Is the pattern a digital illusion, a quirk of analysis, or is it the signature of something we haven't yet begun to understand? That's the part that left scientists uneasy because AI doesn't jump to conclusions. It simply reveals what's there. And what it revealed may point toward an energy event that left behind not just an image but an imprint of order. To those who believe in the divinity of the Shroud, this only reinforces their faith. To skeptics, it's a call for new hypothesis. But one thing is clear. The discovery opened a door. And now that it's open, it can't be closed. What AI just found in the Shroud of Turin left scientists shocked. Not because it gave them an answer, but because it handed them something wise, a better question. Echoes in the scientific world. The discovery didn't go unnoticed. Once the AI findings were quietly circulated among key researchers, word began to spread, not through sensational headlines, but in the form of quiet, cautious interest. For years, the Shroud of Turin had been written off in many academic circles as a closed case. But now, the tone had changed. What had once been a debate between believers and skeptics had become something far more complicated. The structured pattern found by AI couldn't be easily dismissed. It wasn't just a digital fluke. The same geometric consistency appeared in different wavelengths using unrelated imaging techniques, and showed alignment too precise to be accidental. Some scholars tried to reproduce it using known photographic or artistic methods. They failed. Others attempted to disprove it by repeating the AI's process on control images. Again, the results were inconsistent. Whatever the Shroud was, it wasn't behaving like anything science had previously catalogued. Soon, institutions that had long ignored the Shroud began paying attention again. Physicists, data analysts, textile historians, and even cryptographers began reviewing the findings. Most didn't go public. No one wanted to be the first to step into the storm. But behind closed doors, discussions were happening. One panel at a university in Rome described the pattern as spatial intelligence embedded within degradation. Another at a U.S. Institute for Imaging Science suggested the Shroud might be the result of a decaying signal, not a decaying image. These weren't conclusions. They were warnings. The message was clear. Something is happening here that we can't yet explain. Meanwhile, those within theological circles embraced the findings in a very different way. To them, the implications were profound. If the image was not man-made, and if the method of its formation defied all known technologies, ancient or modern, what was left? Some called it evidence of the resurrection. Others were more cautious, labeling it an echo of an unrepeatable event. But not everyone was inspired. Some were unsettled. A few scientists, particularly those involved with radiation theory, raised concerns about the energy required to form such an image. If the cloth had been hit with a burst of light or heat capable of leaving a three-dimensional imprint without scorching the material, that suggested something incredibly powerful, something untraceable. And that led to another uncomfortable possibility. What if the shroud isn't unique? That question sparked a quiet movement among researchers to look for similar image properties in other historical artifacts, burial shrouds, or unexplained relics. So far, nothing comparable has turned up, but the very fact that anyone is looking shows how much the conversation has changed. There was also debate about how the public should be informed. Some researchers feared the findings would be taken out of context. Others felt the mystery had already been co-opted by centuries of belief and doubt. The truth, they argued, would only be useful if it could be studied with objectivity. But the problem with the shroud has always been that no one looks at it without some form of bias. For now, no formal publication has announced a definitive conclusion based on the AI discovery. The Vatican has remained silent. The research groups involved are withholding raw data until they can confirm repeatability. But in private, the word most commonly used to describe the situation isn't hoax, miracle, or anomaly. It's disruption. The shroud has become a challenge not just to history or faith, but to how science understands information, energy, and the thin line between observation and interpretation. One thing is certain: whatever process created the image on the shroud, it left behind a fingerprint. And that fingerprint doesn't match any tool, technique, or explanation we have today. It's there. It's consistent. And as more researchers look into it, it's getting harder to ignore. What if we were never supposed to understand it? The Shroud of Turin has always lived in a strange space, caught between belief and skepticism, history and myth, science and the unknown. But now, after AI pulled something from it that no one had expected to find, a new question is emerging, one that's quietly unsettling even the most grounded minds. What if we were never supposed to understand it? The symmetrical structure uncovered by AI, the precision, the strange layering of information. It's not just unusual, it's deeply out of place. And the more researchers try to make sense of it, the more elusive it becomes. Some have tried framing it as a message. Others say it's more like a residue, something left behind, not intentionally, but as a side effect of a moment that defies replication. This is where things start to drift into uncomfortable territory. Because when something doesn't fit any known model and all attempts to replicate it fail, you're left with only two options. Either your tools are still too primitive, or what you're studying was never made for your understanding. Could it have been some form of energy imprint from a natural process we no longer know how to detect? Or, as some quietly suggest, could it have been something singular, a flash-on moment where whatever happened left behind this haunting echo in cloth? Some theorists believe the shroud might represent a kind of ancient data encoded in a format not meant for human perception, a visual signature of something unearthly. Others argue that thinking this way only leads down the road of mysticism. But AI doesn't lean toward mysticism. It simply reads patterns. And what it read by all available accounts was something that felt engineered. That's why what AI just found in the Shroud of Turin left scientists shocked. Not because it told them the answer, but because it exposed something no one was ready for. A structure without a process, an image without a source, and a result without a clear course. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the shroud was never meant to be explained, only observed. Maybe it's not a message, but a mirror reflecting back not just a face, but everything we still don't understand about life, death, and whatever might come after. It's not confirmation. It's not proof, but it's something worse and maybe more powerful. It's a mystery that deepens the more you look. And this time, the machine saw it, too. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments.